I'm Mark Trahan, and this is Wassaja. One story that won't go away, the battle over pipelines. In Minnesota, Wisconsin, British Columbia, and beyond, people are saying it's time to stop building permanent infrastructure for the extractive industry. Paul Demain reports on an Ojibwe elder who sees this as part of a continuing story.
The pipeline confrontation at Standing Rock in 2016 is now history. On the shores of the Great Lakes, the home of the Anishinaabe, many environmental, legal, and political battles have also been fought. Open pit mining, oil platforms in the local bay, incinerators, pipelines all threaten the people's dependency on food from treaty lands. One warrior who fought these proposals is a Bad River Ojibwe elder who holds a Wisconsin County Supervisor's seat, helping lead local opposition to an open pit mine. My name is Paul Demain, and for Wassaja, we sat down to talk with Joe Rose.
There's a nest down here, and there's another nest over here. Wojo Kwewag, and then a wag guy. Moka and Giza, senders in the cause. Magazi and Dodem. And Moska ZB and Donjaba. Name a Daiwaneni and down. To translate, my Anishinaabe name is the Rising Sun. I'm Eagle Clan of the Bad River Band of Lake Superior, Ojibwe. A member of the Grand Medicine Society called Madewin. I grew up during the World War II era. We attended St. Mary's Indian Mission School, and I graduated from the 8th grade at St. Mary's Indian Mission School right here on the reservation. And my mother had attended the same school when she was young. I grew up in Old Odena. The town has been moved since that. It was a time of kerosene lamps, wood heat, outhouses, and we hauled our water from the town pumps. We ate a lot of rabbit back at that time because there was a very healthy rabbit population, snowshoe hare that is, and either venison or maybe waterfowl or partridge or was some kind of wild game. And we ate a lot of fish also. We used to fish year-round, and during the winter we'd set our nets under the ice, and so we had fresh fish all the time. And I remember where the White River comes in to meet the Bad. There used to be an old black iron railroad bridge there, big one, and then you'd go by there, and you'd see all of these little kerosene lanterns down on the ice. You go down, and the old guys would be down there, maybe sitting on an orange crate with a kerosene lamp under the orange crate. Looked like a little town down there. And the ice was thick enough at that time that it was safe. But that was an old tradition. I remember when I was a kid in grade school, we used to go down and fish. And right now, I wouldn't want to venture out on that ice.
Has that been a trend that's been occurring for the last decade or number of years? Has there been a difference in when you can tap maple trees?
For sure. My mother has a sugar bush down in the Bad River Flat. We've been making maple sugar there for about the past 50 years. We usually boil all night and take our sleeping bag down there, and we sleep in a lean-to. We make a lean-to there. In our language, Iska Kamizage Gizis, that's maple sugar moon. That's pretty much April. We're tapping trees and we're making maple syrup in March now. And probably several weeks earlier than what a normal maple sugar season was years ago. I think climatic change has a lot to do with it.
The lodge and the casino have emergency generators, but nobody else has electricity.
July 11th, 2016, Highway 2 was washed out. And then there was another big washout on Highway 13. And then another thing that happened with these big floods had quite an effect on the birch trees in the area. And in fact, you can't find any of the great big birch trees anymore. Most of them are dying from the tops down. And you'll find the smaller ones, oh, maybe this big. So if you go out to gather materials to make a birch bark canoe, it will take you maybe 3 or 4 weeks just to gather materials before you even get started making the canoe. And also, those big sheets of birch bark were also used for the coverings for the wigwams. And so now we're using tarps to cover our wigwams. So a lot of things have changed.
Tell me a little bit about the battles that Bad River has had to try to preserve clean water in their environment here.
Oh, we can go back, I can go back personally about 40 years. I've been involved in all of these things. And I remember an oil company called Terra Energy Limited came in and wanted to drill for oil in Keystone Township, Bayfield County, not too far from Lake Superior. Another one was, there was a corporation out of northern Minnesota. They called themselves Neutralysis. And what they were was a garbage incineration company. So we bought that one off. Over at White Pine, Michigan, the Copper Range Mining Company had mined most of the high-grade ore, and they were going to pump about 10 or 11 million gallons of sulfuric acid in those abandoned mine shafts in order to recover whatever copper was left there. They started transporting sulfuric acid across a rickety old trestle on the south end of our reservation. And other guys went down and set up camp and blockaded the tracks, because we remembered that Great Northern Railroad had dumped a carload of benzene into the Namaji River over at Superior, and they had to evacuate that whole area. And Wisconsin Central Railroad, who was transporting this sulfuric acid across that trestle, had an accident just about a year prior to that, I think over at Weyauwega, Wisconsin. Anyway, these guys blockaded the tracks, contacted the United States Justice Department, and we got them involved. And we brought Wisconsin Central Railroad to the negotiating table. The negotiations gave the tribal council time to sit down and pass a resolution requiring a heavier gauge track for safety purposes. Now, they knew what they were doing, because the Wisconsin Central Railroad came back and they said, well, if we have to lay a heavier gauge track, we'll go bankrupt. We can't do that. And we pretty well put an end to the big smokestack over at White Pine, Michigan.
And it wasn't your only battle against a potential mine in this area. The Gogebic taconite came along, and they wanted to build a huge open pit in the Pinokies and put a slurry pond.
If there had been a slurry pond on July 11th, 2016, that mining discharge would have wound up in Lake Superior. And all you had to do is take a look at some aerial photographs or even satellite photographs, and you could see that siltation plume extended beyond the islands. And that's the same path that discharge would take. And it would affect everything, every microorganism at the bottom of the food chain all the way to the top. Not just the wild rice, and other things, but everything. and we knew that. In Bad River, we went down and set up a ceremonial lodge in Ashland County on the Pinocchio Ridge. And we did a ceremony near some open water on the Tyler Forks River there at the base of the Pinocchios. And we probably put about, maybe 200, 300 tobacco ties in the water at that time. And that's just an example of one of the ceremonies that we did. Another ceremony is we put out 7 eagle feather staffs, one starting at the source of the Bad River, Lake Caroline, and the eagle feather staffs all the way to where Bad River empties into Lake Superior. And we had a great big ceremony where we decorated those 7 eagle feather staffs with the various clan colors, and there were different groups that would take out each one of those 7 staffs. And so we had a big feast right there at Lake Caroline, the source of the Bad River, before we planted the staffs. And I think that all the ceremonies and prayers and everything that we did is what really defeated GTAC.
It's like Bad River has been at the lead of all these environmental things. The latest one speaks against the fossil fuel industry by saying they no longer want this pipeline number 5. Tell us about the issue of the pipeline.
The Bad River Tribal Council passed a resolution saying that they were not going to renew the lease for Line 3 or Line 5 that crosses the reservation. That line crosses the river, is under the water there, and probably hasn't been maintained since they installed it. And what we're really concerned about is a prospect of them of transporting tar sands sludge through those lines. That line would run under the Mackinac Bridge there. And I guess they've done some studies on that and found that in studying the currents and so on, that would threaten Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, and Lake Huron, I guess, if you'd happen to get a break there. And all we have to do is to take a look at the environmental history of these corporations, and we know that there's been some major spills. So that's what we're very concerned about right now.
In all these discussions, you talk about ceremony. Tell us about the role of ceremony, and tell us about the role of prophecy as you understand it in where we are today.
Well, we were told by Joseph K. Shaman to start using our ceremonies, our sacred bundles, and our sacred objects more often. That's part of the reason that we're able to prevail when our water and our air is threatened. We look 7 generations ahead and ask ourselves, what are we going to be leaving to that 7th generation? Will they have fresh air, clean water? Will there be any wilderness left? What kind of a polluted world would they live in if we don't do something? So right now we're in this age of the 7th fire. And in the age of the 7th fire was prophesied that Anishinaabe people would turn and look back, began to retrace their footsteps. And their footsteps would take them back to ancient times and ancient knowledge. And so wealth will no longer be measured in terms of money, materialistic gain, political power, and all of those egocentric things. But true wealth will be measured in terms of clean water, fresh air, pristine wilderness, and a restoration of the natural balance. And And so it's a responsibility of the Anishinaabe to share that. And so that's our mission right now. The same was the mission 5 generations back when 2 of my grandfathers sat down and signed that Treaty of La Pointe that established reservations for the Lake Superior, Ojibwe in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan, and saved us from being removed from our ancestral homelands to the dry, arid wastelands west of the Mississippi.
Reserving the right to hunt and fish and gather your medicines and everything in northern Wisconsin 150 years ago was forward-looking. Do you see the potential for a positive future considering where we've been going?
Yeah, yes I do. I don't think it's hopeless. In fact, I'm not going to give up. We won most of these, we've won all of these battles up to now. And I saw a documentary on what was happening near the Standing Rock Reservation. And what really impressed me is that there were people of all ages there, including young people and people of all colors as well. All 4 colors on that medicine wheel. And so in a way, those prophecies are being realized in this new age of the 7th fire. Nijwaswa Iskadewan. So I think that grassroots activism is what can defeat any of these threats.
So as we walk, keep that prayer with you and keep in mind that what we're doing is we're defending the sacred.
Standing Rock and our legacy. Legacy is a word that means a gift. A legacy can often be a gift from people who give over time, even over generations. Such is the Juneau legacy. Carol and Denise Juneau, citizens of the Mandan Hidatsa Arikara Nation, who in their own way did much to reshape Montana's politics. Carol Juneau told me she ran for state office because that's where she could make a difference. Along the way, she argued for improving the mechanics of democracy, stronger tribal economies, and the education of all Montanans about Native Americans. Native people, she has said, are citizens of the state of Montana, the same as other citizens. I'd like to see that Indian people and Indian tribes in Montana aren't left outside of everything. Her daughter, Denise Juneau, has a remarkable legacy too. She seriously jokes about her journey from Head Start to Harvard. She was twice elected to statewide office, the only Native American woman ever to do so in any state. She ran for Congress 2 years ago and came up short in the wave that sent Donald J. Trump to the White House. Along the way, she inspired many. I followed her on the campaign trail and watched young girls approach her for selfies. The images of smiling faces were clear. These young people saw themselves in Juneau. They saw a future, perhaps in education, perhaps in the halls of Congress. Legacy. Now, my conversation with Carol and Denise Juneau.
We were always so worried about her. Is she going to be okay? Is people going to hate her or be mean to her, or are they going to support her? Are they going to those kinds of things parents worry about? And but yeah, she was brave and courageous for that.
Because it is scary. It's like there are people who aren't going to like you, and there are people who are going to try to tear you down, and there are going to be people who say mean things about you. And but I remember at one point, and during one election, my mom said, "Did those people ever invite you over to dinner?" And I'm like, "Nope." She goes, "Well, don't worry about them then." And it's like, all right. And so I always think that it's like, you weren't my friend to begin with. You're not my friend now, and you're not going to be in the future. So say what you want to say. Yeah. But I do know my race was inspirational. I know my campaign was, because I still go around and people thank me for running, and people from all walks of life they're happy I did that.
Her inspiration, I think, to young kids There's this little girl, where was it, that did a poster. She was Denise Juneau. And at that point, Denise was wearing blazers and little pants and shirts. So this little girl had little blazers and little pants and showing her little poster outfit of Denise, which I thought was really, really good. But I said, wherever she would go, I said, and there would be young, Native kids there. They would, first they would go for pictures and things like that. So it was, and it didn't matter what community. She gave people hope and inspiration, so maybe at some point one of those little girls will be in office somewhere.
I think campaigns really are about getting out into the communities, getting out and finding people and striking a chord with them, and you bring your whole being to that. And there's people know when you're being authentic and when you're not, and it really is about being authentic to yourself, being authentic to your community, being authentic as a candidate and what you stand for, and being truthful, because you're going to be seen through if you're not. And so for me, it was really just about making sure that we were getting out there, we were getting involved with different communities and at different levels, and just talking to all kinds of different people that we had not been engaged with before.
Picture, an Indian woman walking down the halls of Congress, going into Congress, those types of things. I think it would make Indian people throughout the United States so proud. She would be a role model for young Indian girls, young Indian women, and it's time to do that.
Every time another Native woman steps up to run for any office, whether that be the state legislature, city council, U.S. Congress, it sort of paves the way. And there's sort of a pipeline, which is really awesome right now, that there was never been a path for Native women to really step up, and I believe right now we're in a time and space where we see that happening. And there will be a first at some point, and after that I think it's exciting that we'll be able to say who follows her and who gets to join her in the halls of Congress and walk down hand in hand down the hall and see and advocate for American Indian people and their state and their constituents and everybody that they represent.
One of the really interesting stories, I said in the legislature, Denise was the superintendent of public instruction and was in charge of the education budget for the state of Montana, which is about half of the general fund. Anna Whiting Sorrell was in charge of Department of Public Health and Human Services. She's a member of the Salish Kootenai tribe. And that's almost probably the second half, except with the exception of a small source. And so we always kind of quietly laughed about it, of saying there's two Indian women running the state of Montana's budget. And I said, I don't think the non-Indians ever really realized what they were, that was, but that was.
And having Anna in that seat, the policies that we were able to co-create as far as making sure that wraparound services were happening in schools on reservations and all these other things. But it really was the power of the budget, because the budget drives priorities. Budget drives what you value, and when you had two Indian women in charge of the majority of the state budget, that was pretty powerful.
That was, so I said that's never been, I think that's always a good story to tell, or for Indian people to know about, that you can reach that level of power, whether it be elected or whether it be administratively, and really make change. And one of the things I look back on with pride is taking the word squaw off of sites in Montana. 76 places in Montana had that name on there, that derogatory word. And it took many years, but I think every site now has a new name of some sort. That was a huge change for the state and stuff. So that's a couple of the things that was really good.
And I do think it shows the power of Indian people sitting in those seats of power, is basically how you can change things, and they're not just for the present, they're not just for that legislative session or that year, they're like forever. And that policy really gave power back to Indian tribes and to Indian people to rename their place names and name them something significant to them, and that lives on. And that's from way back when. And now you can walk into schools in our state and see Indians reflected in classrooms and hallways and the books they read, and think of the students who are growing up in those schools now and the type of state, tribal, and national leaders they're going to be when there's a basic understanding of government to government relations and why, and the issues of tribal sovereignty and why, and how, you know, native languages matter to culture and how you're going to revive those. And that's the importance of Indian people getting elected to a national level as well. When there's a Native woman elected to Congress, those are the types of conversations and discussions that will be held in the halls of Congress that are absent right now. And there needs to be that understanding if we're going to create good federal policy for tribal nations.
This spring, the Seattle School District announced that Denise Juneau was one of the 3 finalists to run its schools. And on April 4th, she got the job. The Seattle Times put the hire in historic terms. When Denise Juneau takes the reins of Seattle Public Schools in July, she will be the first Native American superintendent in the city's history. The Seattle School District educates more than 53,000 children from kindergarten through 12th grade. The district's yearly budget is $857.7 million. The school district says its students speak 108 languages, and according to federal data, Seattle's 98118 zip code is home to speakers of 66 languages, more than any other zip code in the United States. Juneau's challenges are great. Like many urban districts, Seattle is challenged by an educational achievement gap that persists across ethnic groups. There are some 2,000 Native American students in the Seattle School District. In Montana, Juneau oversaw a school district where more than half of the American Indian children were in urban districts. Legacy. I'm Mark Trahant, and this is Wassaja.
Tell you otherwise, till they see the world through your eyes.